My name is Joe Mancina. I'm the CFO and City Treasurer for the City of Windsor, and I want to take a few minutes today to give you an overview of the 2020 recommended capital and operating budgets that we've presented to City Council and that will be deliberated on the end of January. Of our overall budget, approximately 78% of the budget is mandatory or has very limited discretion, if you will, very minimal discretion, but for the most part is mandatory, as opposed to 22% of the budget where there is a discretionary element to the budget. But even in the discretionary part of the budget, it funds a number of services which are very valuable to our resident, as things such as the transit service or our parks, recreation programs, crossing guards. Things that are very valued services also represent a component of that 22%, which is fully discretionary, if you will. Essentially, the budget that is recommended to City Council for approval is divided into three different components. So the first component is the increase to the property tax levy related to city departments for all the services that we provide in the various city departments, and that increase is 1.2%. Additionally, within the 2020 recommended budget, we have introduced the asset management plan levy increase, which is an additional 1.16% increase. The asset management plan was approved by City Council earlier this year, and the budget that we've prepared is put forth with a recommendation to provide a 6-year incremental funding of approximately $4.8 million each year in order to address the funding shortfall on the asset management plan. So what would happen is it would be investing in our capital budget to the level to ensure the continued service sustainability at the existing service levels of our existing capital asset inventory, including roads, the various buildings and facilities that are owned by the city, investments in playground infrastructure, investments in tree trimming and the various forestry programs relative to tree trimming. So there is a number of assets and the maintenance of those assets that are included in there. And then finally, there is recommendations put forward by the various agencies, boards, and commissions that have put forward requests for increases to their budget for 2020, and they total an additional 1.2%. So when you add all of those together, those different components of what is before City Council, it is a 3.56, essentially a 3.6% increase that's being requested of City Council for funding for the 2020 operating budget. They've brought in some reductions on the provincial level which have impacted the municipality. Most specifically, we've had about $1 million reduction in our Ontario Municipal Partnership Funding Grant, which is an unconditional grant that we receive at the city. It's approximately $23 million a year, and they've reduced that by $1 million. And so the increased pressures on our budget as a result of that are reflected in the 2020 budget. As well, our employment and social services area have seen some reductions in grant funding for their programs, and so that they've mitigated to the extent possible those provincial reductions in the portfolio, but certainly it's still resulting in a almost $600,000 increase to the municipality that is before council for consideration. With the positive economic circumstances that we've encountered over the last couple of years, what we're facing is an increasing demand from the residents. Key areas such as building and planning in terms of building permits, inspections, and so forth have certainly required additional resources to service those demands. Higher ridership in terms of our transit service is another area that we are looking at, and certainly the 2020 recommended budget does present some items relative to the enhanced service levels for transit and Sunday service. As well, in our Human Resources Department, we've faced unprecedented retirements in the last number of years, as well as with the positive economic circumstances, a changing workforce. And therefore, the demands on our human resources folks has certainly increased. So this budget for 2020 does include recommendations for some enhanced resources in our human resources area. The fiscal circumstances that we're facing are certainly positive from the standpoint of the prudent financial decisions that have been made over the past number of years. I mean, just to walk you through some of that certainly placed us in a very positive position to be able to address some of these increasing service level demands that we have before us. In terms of our property tax levy, for example, if one looks at the 2008 property tax levy for the City of Windsor, it was set at $412 million. If one looks at the 2019 property tax levy, we were actually at $415 million. So essentially a $3 million increase in the property tax levy over essentially a 10-year period. If we had increased our municipality's tax levy over that period at about inflation, one would expect that to be about $512 million. So essentially, our taxpayers and the ratepayers have had cumulative tax savings of about $756 million during this period. And essentially, it's a $97 million perpetual annual savings going forward for 2019. And then essentially, that gives us a starting point as we establish our 2020 budget. City Council has worked very, very hard at reducing the debt levels for the municipality. As one can see, the gross debt level back in 2003 for the municipality was at $230 million, and it's projected to be $41 million by 2023. At the end of 2019, which is the end of this fiscal year, or this past fiscal year, our debt stood at $71 million. So a substantial decrease in our long-term debt. If we look at our total tax levy over the years, and we compare ourselves to our peers, looking at a period from 2006 through 2018, the City of Windsor's total property tax levy has gone up by 3.6%. So a relatively modest increase over an extended period of time. When you compare to municipalities in the BMA study that we utilize, which populations greater than 100,000, essentially we are the lowest increase over that period of time for our property tax levy. We have added flexibility essentially because of the prudent financial decisions that have been made over the years. So we've had some added flexibility that has allowed us to bring forward the budget as presented.